One of the additions they've made to doing research at the Royal Ontario Museum, started in the 1970s and very much in the 1980s, was to actually add some molecular labs that can help us to actually study how animals are related to each other using other things rather than morphological characters such as, plumage characteristics or bones. We can actually look at the DNA of different animals and actually be able to compare how they're related to each other, whether you're studying rare and endangered species, or basically to work how distant animals are related to each other. Now, the heart of actually doing a lot of the DNA work we do now is this particular machine that we have over here. It's called a DNA thermal cycler. What it actually does is it actually replicates DNA for us. So we can actually start off with a piece of DNA, and the DNA can either be from a blood sample or from a hair sample, or perhaps the DNA can actually come from a bone that could be several thousand years old. And this machine will, in a couple of hours, replicate millions of copies of that particular gene that you want to amplify. And once you actually have amplified that gene, you can then actually sequence the DNA using a DNA thermal cycler. What it does is it'll actually read the DNA sequences and will allow us to compare those DNA sequences for the different animals. Now, to give you an idea of one particular project that we're involved in, this is a mount from 1882. This is Atlantic salmon taken from Lake Ontario. In fact, it's been reported on that Lake Ontario was one of the greatest freshwater salmon lakes in the world when European settlers arrived here in the 17 and 1800s. But the polluting of the lake and the damming of the rivers wiped out the populations by about 1900. And now, ever since then, the Ministry of Natural Resources in Canada, as well as the Department of Fisheries and Oceans in the United States, have been trying to bring back salmon stocks in Lake Ontario. And one thing they've been doing is capturing more Atlantic salmon from someplace like in Nova Scotia and using those fish to restock the lake. So far, it hasn't been all that successful. So what we're doing actually here in the DNA lab is that the museum has 6 mounts taken from the 1800s. And we've actually succeeded in recovering DNA from these particular mounts and are now using those DNA patterns to find out if any of the fish that are descended from Lake Ontario still exist, because prior to them going extinct, eggs were actually taken around and used to stock other lakes and rivers. Our logic being here is that the fish they're currently using may not be the best suited, but being used to a saltwater condition. The ones that will be in Lake Ontario will be trapped in freshwater, and the ones that were here had been in freshwater for a very long time, so they adapted to it. So we're actually using DNA fingerprints from the salmon to hopefully find the original stocks and use them to restock Lake Ontario.